How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Aleph, Daf 101 of BavaMetzia. Friends. Today we're going to learn two Mishnayos. I think it might be also like another long one. But okay, yeah, it's going to be good. It's BavaMetzia. All right, Givaldik. We're going to start in Daf Kuf Mud Beis. At the Mishnah towards the bottom. Okay, so Shimon sells. So Shimon's got property. He's got karka. He's got property, and on the property there's olive trees, and he sells the olive trees to Reuven. Right? Shimon's got the property with the olive trees. He sells the olive trees to Reuven. Le'etzim. I guess that they're not producing much olives, and therefore he sells them to Reuven to chop down and use for wood. So he sells it for wood. Maybe he's going to make something beautiful. Maybe he's a carpenter and he's going to make something gorgeous. So Shimon sells his trees, his olive trees, to be used as wood. Now, Reuven didn't immediately chop down the trees. He didn't pull a George Washington. He waited. And then there were some olives that grew, but not much. Right? The trees Sachakol produced less than a revi'is per sa'ah of olives. So lo mashu. Hare elu shel balazesim. So Reuven keeps them. There isn't really much to talk about there. Not much of a yield. There wasn't meant to be a yield. There were just kind of trees being sold as wood, not for their olive production capabilities. As an aside, if it was a healthy olive tree that produced a lot of olives, then there might be an issue with cutting it down in the first place. It produced a little bit of olives. Okay, Reuven can keep it. Seder. Also, revi'is l'sa, but if they actually produced a more substantial amount of olives, right? A revi'is, I guess, of oil per sa'ah of olives. So now we get a machlokes between Reuven and Shimon. Reuven says these olives came from the trees that I purchased, and therefore it's my olive oil. And Shimon says, "What are you talking about? It grew on my land. It's my land that's responsible for this yield. Therefore, I want it." So Yachloku, so they split it. Okay, fine. All right, very good. All right, very good. Okay, very good. All right. Shotaf nor Zeisav. Now this is an interesting scenario. The Gemara is gonna go into this. It's an interesting scenario. So we'll let the Gemara really explain it. But let's say Reuven here in this scenario, Reuven. Because in the previous scenario, Reuven was the one who has the trees, and Shimon is the one who has the property. So in this case, what happens is Reuven has property with olive trees on it, but a storm comes, the olive trees somehow get washed away, and they end up on Shimon's field, and Shimon replants them. So now you basically have Reuven's olive trees on Shimon's field, planted in Shimon's field, on Shimon's property. So Shatavnar is Esav. So if the river washed away Reuven's olives, Vinosnam lesoch stei chavero, and the river deposited the trees on Shimon's property, and then Shimon replanted them. Zeomer zeisi godlu v'zeomer artzi godlu yachloku, and now we get to similar machlokas to like before. The olives, the trees produce olives. Reuven says, "Hey, these are my trees. These are my trees that you replanted. They're my trees. They're my olives." Shimon says, "Ma pitom, it's my ground. It's my property. It's my land. It's my karka." Right, and therefore it is my olives. So Yachloku, again, they split it. Heichi dami. So now says the Gemara, what exactly is the scenario in the ratio of the Mishnah when Shimon sells his olive trees to Reuven to use for wood? So we said if they produce a little bit of olives, so then Reuven can keep them. If they produce a more substantial amount of olives, so then Reuven and Shimon split it be'etzim. Hechidami, what's the scenario? Either Amar le kotes la'alter. Look, if the instructions that Shimon gave to Ruvain were, Ruvain, I'm selling you these olive trees for wood, chop them down immediately. Go hire George Washington, and he's going to chop it down. I know it's George Washington. He worked with cherry trees, but all right, whatever. Okay. Hechidami the Amar le kotes la'alter. If Shimon's instructions to Ruvain were, Ruvain, come cut down these, chop down these trees. So afilu pochis mervius nami levala karke. Well, if the instructions that Shimon gave to Ruvain were, Ruvain, I want you to chop down these olive trees, and he didn't listen. Well, if he didn't do what he was supposed to do, Ruvain doesn't get those olives. I don't care how much there is. They go to Shimon. Either Omerle kol emas debois coats. If the instructions were, look, Ruvain, I'm selling you these trees whenever you feel like it, come and chop it down whenever you want. Well then, afilu vias nami the valzeisim. Well then, if that's the case, if the instructions to Ruvain were, look, Ruvain, do what you want with them. Well then, if he leaves them, that's his prerogative, and any grape and any olives that grow from the tree should belong to him. There is. He purchased the trees. There's no instructions to chop them down right away. So lo tzricha de amrle stomach. Well, it's talking about a scenario where Shimon didn't give instructions to Ruvain. Shimon sold the trees, the olive trees, to Ruvain for wood, but he didn't give him any instructions about any kind of time frames to cut down the trees. So lo tzricha de amrle stomach. So pachis meravius. So therefore, what the Mishnah is saying is, look, if the trees predictably didn't produce much olives, which is why Shimon was selling it in the first place, well then lo kapte inche, Shimon's not really going to care much, and therefore Ruvain can keep them. But revius, but if already the olive tree is producing enough olives to create a revius of oil, well then kapti and that's something already significant. And Shimon's going to be like, wait, hold up, I think that my land played a role over here. So and therefore they divided up. Okay. In that scenario, when we talk about a revius of wine, we're talking about do I keep on saying wine? Obviously, we're talking about olives and olive oil. A revius of oil, we're talking about an amount of oil that is valued at the value of a revius post, right? I mean net, meaning after you take out any expenses that Reuven had, in production and things like that. Meaning if the net result of the oil is a revius, so then that is where they would split it. Okay, fine. Shotov nor zesav. Okay, so now we get to the seifa of the Mishnah, which is it's an interesting scenario. The scenario in the seifa of the Mishnah was where the river overflows, or some kind of storm maybe. Somehow it manages to wash away Reuven's trees, his olive trees, and they end up on Shimon, downstream on Shimon's property, and Shimon replants them. And now there are fruits, and right now there's olives, and Reuven's saying, wait, these are my trees, I want these olives. So, Amar Ulas Azula, Amar Ishlakish, Lo Shanu Ela Shene'ekru Bigushayen, Ule Acher Shalish. Ooh, this is Gishmak, Chevez. It's not going to be a quick daf, but it's going to be a Gishmak one. So again, Amula Amar Ishlakish Loshanu El Shenekru Bigushayin, that Reuven's olive trees got swept away by the river with their earth. Right? It wasn't just like the bare, the trees didn't just get pulled out of the ground without any earth, just the roots and stuff. No, it was with mamish earth enough that it would be able to still produce fruit, I think. Or at least it would still be able to live. So, that being the case, that it got uprooted with like enough earth to be able to stay alive, well then it doesn't have to start over in terms of orla, right? Meaning, if you plant an olive tree, well then you have to wait 3 years until you could do anything with it, right? It's orla for the first 3 years. But if you uproot an olive tree, with all of its earth and replant that, and there was enough earth to keep it alive the whole time, well, then it doesn't start over. If it's a 10-year-old tree, it's still a 10-year-old tree. It doesn't start over. But I guess if you uproot it without any earth, well, then if you replant it, it starts over. So we're talking about a scenario where the olive trees got uprooted with their earth, with enough earth that they would be able to stay alive, and then Shimon found them and replanted them. But because there was enough earth to stay alive, the Orla clock doesn't reset, i.e., you can immediately start eating the fruits that it produces. So, okay, fine. Now, Amar Ula says Ula. Amar Shlakish says Shlakish. Loshanu ela shenekru begushain. So we're talking about where the olive trees got uprooted with their earth. Okay. Ula achar shalosh. But now we fast forward the clock 3 years. It's 3 years later, and the olive trees have already been replanted for 3 years, and they're producing fruit, producing olives, and Reuven's saying, look, it's my olive trees that are producing the fruit. Shimon says it's my earth that's producing the fruit. So we say split it. But within those 3 years, all of the olives that were produced within those 3 years are exclusively Reuven's. Because Reuven says to Shimon, look, if you would have planted these trees from scratch, you would not be able to eat them right now during the first 3 years. So I'm taking these olives. It's not like you would have been able to eat them anyway. Say you planted them from scratch, you couldn't eat them for the first 3 years. So give them to me. You're not losing anything. You wouldn't have been able to eat them anyways. So they're my trees. You have this kind of right. Therefore, you wouldn't have anyways been able to eat these olives. Therefore, give them to me. Okay. That within these 3 years, within the first 3 years, all of it belongs to Reuven. All of the olives produced belong to Reuven. To Amalek, because Reuven says to Shimon, look, if you were to have planted fresh trees, brand new trees, then for the first 3 years, would you have been able to eat them? No, you would not have. Therefore, you don't eat them now. I'm taking all of them. But after 3 years, then they split it, because at that point Shimon already has a right to them, because after 3 years he would be able to eat the fruits anyways. But let Shimon then say to Reuven after 3 years, why should I split it with you? If I would have planted these trees from scratch, well, now it's been 3 years. I would have been able to eat them, all of the olives exclusively. Why should I give you half? So Elikiasa Ravin Amar of Rish Lakish, rather when Ravin came, he says in the name of Rish Lakish, Lo shanu ela shenekru b'gusheinu v'soch shalosh. So Ravin says, yes, we're talking about where the trees were uprooted with their earth, sure, but we are talking about within the first 3 years. Within the first 3 years. But after the first 3 years, then yes, Shimon says to Reuven, Akol of alakarka, Shimon gets all of the olives, because the Amalei says to Reuven, look, if I would have planted from scratch, after 3 years, they would have been exclusively mine. So now I'm keeping them for myself at this point. I'm not giving you any of it. Okay, but within the first 3 years, they have to split it. But let Reuven, within the first 3 years, say to Shimon, why doesn't Reuven say to Shimon within the first 3 years, hey Shimon, why should I have to split the olives with you? If you would have planted an olive tree from scratch, you wouldn't have been able to eat the olives now. So get lost. I'm not giving you anything. I want them exclusively. Well, Mishum Da'amale, because Shimon would respond and say, well, yeah, it's true. I wouldn't have been able to eat the olives if I planted from scratch, but also if I planted the trees from scratch, they would be much smaller than they are now. And since they're much smaller, I would have been able to make up for it with other, like vegetables and things that I would be able to eat. Right? Ananati, yeah, sure. If I planted olive trees from scratch, yeah, maybe I wouldn't have been able to eat the olives, but have a katine. The olive trees would have still been small at that point, and they wouldn't have produced much shade, which meant that there would be more sun around them. I would have been able to, therefore, plant beets and other kinds of vegetables, and because the trees were small, so sun would still get through, and they would grow. So, yeah, I wouldn't have been able to eat the olives, but it's not like I would have been sitting there twiddling my thumbs. There would have been an opportunity during that time to plant other things. So therefore, now that I have these bigger trees, I can't plant those other things, and therefore, yes, I do feel that I have the right to split the olives with you. But after 3 years, Shimon would get the olives exclusively, because at that point, even if he would have planted from scratch, he would have been able to eat them exclusively, or he would have been able to eat them at that point anyways. Tano, if Reuven says to Shimon, Tana, so we was talking about Brisa. Omer Hala, if Reuven says to Shimon, Zeisai ani nota, look, I'm taking back my trees, Pashit. Right? Reuven's trees got washed away. They ended up on Shimon's property. Shimon replanted them. Reuven comes and says, hey, Shimon, I'm taking them back. I'm taking back my trees. Ain Shoman Lo, we don't allow Reuven to do this. My timer, why don't we allow Reuven to take back his trees? Rabbi Yechanan says, Rabbi Yechanan, Mishum Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, in the interest of settling the land of Israel. We want that, right, that Eretz Yisrael should be cultivated, should be worked like the chalutzim, like the Tzionim in Eretz Yisrael. They came and they came as farmers and they worked the land. And so says Rabbi Yechanan, Mishum Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Reuven can't take back his olive trees because we want that if Shimon plants those olive trees, they stay there in the land of Eretz Yisrael. Amar B'Yirmiyah K'goin Da Tzricha Rabba. An opinion like this, to learn an Indian like this of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, we need a great rabbi like Rabbi Yechanan. Tanan awesome. We learn over there in Mishnah is Demai. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda Makabel Deavosav Min Anochri. All right, this is going to be interesting. It's going to be It's going to be epis. Hamakabel Sod Deavosav Min Anochri Me'asav V'Nosein Lo. Savua Mai Deavosav Etzisov Amai Karilo Deavosav. Steavo Mitzchak V'Yakov V'Kosova in Kinyan L'Nochri B'Etzisol Lafkia Miad Maisu Makabel K'chocher Dom Machocher Ben Ovad Ben Lo Ovad B'Y Asur Umetan Le D'Chiporei Chovoso Domi Af Makabel Nami Kiporei Chovoso Domi Me'asav V'Nosin Lo. Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. Let's start over. We learned in Demai. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda Makabel Steavosim and Anochri. All right. So first, okay, there's like 3 things that are happening here. First of all, Kablonus versus Chachirus. So when we say I'm a Kabel over here, we're talking about a sharecropper. A sharecropper as opposed to a renter, right? A sharecropper works the field, right? So you have somebody who owns the field, and then you have a sharecropper who works the field, and he works the field for a percentage of the yield. Okay, so it's the owner's field, but the sharecropper works the field, and then he can keep a percentage of the field, right? Let's say 50% of the field, and then the other 50% goes to the sharecropper, to the owner of the field. The other option is you could rent a field. And if you rent a field, the entire yield is yours, but you just have to pay a rental fee, right? You're renting it for a fixed amount per year. You rent it, but then the field is entirely yours while you're renting it. So here we're talking about a sharecropper who works the field of the landlord, the person who owns the field, and he's like working it for the owner. And then 50% goes to the owner, and the sharecropper keeps 50%. Okay. Secondly, the assumption is at least that we're talking about a field that is owned by a Nochri in Eretz Yisrael. And the assumption is that a field that is owned by a Nochri in Eretz Yisrael, the same laws of Trumas and Maasros still apply. And therefore, the sharecropper, let's call him Ruvain, has to still separate Trumas and Maasros properly. And number 3 is that we are assuming that there is no difference in practice between the way that Trumas and Maasros would be separated for a sharecropper versus for a renter, versus somebody who is renting the field. And what that means is that, well, if you're renting the field, okay, if you rent a field, right, you're a farmer, you rent a field, you pay. So let's say the rental fee is 50 bushels of wheat a year, or the equivalent in money, but let's say 50 bushels of wheat is the rental fee. So now, say the field produces 100 bushels of wheat. So the renter would have to separate Trumas and Maasros, right? 2% is Truma, 10% is Maaser Rishon, another 10% Maaser Sheni. He rented the field, it's his field. The field produced 100 bushels. From those 100 bushels, he has to separate Trumas and Maasros. From those 100 bushels, he also, from the net gain, right, post Trumas and Maasros, he owes the owner of the field 50 bushels, but that was the rental fee, and then the rest is what he can take home, is his net gain. Meaning it's the 100 bushels minus the Trumas and Maasros minus the rental fee of 50 bushels. Now we are assuming that the same would be true for a sharecropper. That if the sharecropping arrangement is for 50-50, so it would be the same thing. The field produces 100 bushels. He would have to separate Trumas and Maasros himself, right? So that would be 2% Truma, another 10% Maaser Rishon, another 10% Maaser Sheni, and from what's left over, he would have to separate another 50 bushels, which was 50% of the original 100. Those would go to the sharecropper, to the owner, and then he gets the rest. Meaning the Trumas and Maasros are not split with the owner. The sharecropper, just like a renter, needs to separate Trumas and Maasros from the entire value of 100 bushels. Now, with that, let's dive in again from the beginning. Tanan we learned in a Mishnah in Demai. Reb Yehuda Omer says, Reb Yehuda, Hamakabel Soda Sdei Avosav Min HaNochri. So somebody who is a sharecropper on a Sdei Avosav, which in a second we're gonna assume means a field in Eretz Yisrael, Min HaNochri, that is owned by a Nochri, and he's sharecropping on the field. Me'aser, he separates Trumas and Maasros from the full field. If the yield was 100 bushels, so he separates Trumas and Maasros from the 100 bushels. V'nosein lo, and then afterwards he gives 50% of the original amount of the 100. He gives 50 of them to the Nochri. Savua, my Sdei Avosav Eretz Yisrael. So what we're saying is that, what we want to say is that Sdei Avosav is Eretz Yisrael. So we're talking about a field in Eretz Yisrael. V'amai karla Sdei Avosav. How can we call it Sdei Avosav? How can we call the field in Eretz Yisrael Sdei Avosav? Sdei Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. It's the field of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. V'kasovar, and also behold, ein kinyan l'nochri b'Eretz Yisrael avkiyah miyad meiser. That if a Nochri owns land in Eretz Yisrael, the land is still, right, the yield is still going to be chayiv in Trumas and Maasros, even though it's owned by a Nochri. And therefore the sharecropper needs to separate Trumas and Maasros. Umekabel kechocher dami. And a sharecropper is like a renter. Machocher, just like when it comes to a renter, if the rental agreement was that he needs to pay the owner 50 bushels of wheat, Bein avad, bein lo avad, whether the field produced a lot, whether it produced a little, whether he worked it, whether he didn't work it, whatever it is, the amount that he needs to pay the owner of the field is fixed, 50 bushels. Boy asure umetale. He needs to separate Trumas and Maasros from the full field, from the 100 bushels, and he still needs to pay the owner of the field 50 bushels for the rental. D'chiporeh chovaso dami. That the renter is basically he's repaying a debt, right? He has a debt of 50 bushels and he has to repay those 50 bushels. Aside from the Trumas and Maisus, he has to separate. And what he takes home is what remains. Af Makabel Nami, so Oichit, a Makabel, so also the same is true of a sharecropper, right? The 50% that he gives to the owner of the field is from the gross. It's not that needs to entirely go to the Nachri, but they don't split the Trumas and Maisus. No, the Trumas and Maisus are separated from the 100 bushels, and he still needs to give 50 bushels to the Nachri. It's considered like he's paying back a debt to the Nachri, and he separates Trumas and Maisus from the full 100, and he also pays 50% from the full 100. He also pays the 50 bushels. Amr of Kahana to Rav Papi, says Rav Kahana to Rav Papi. V'amrila to Rav Zvid, some say to Rav Zvid. Elo, Hadatani, that which we learn in the Brayso. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda Mekabel Sdei Avosov Mimatzik Nochri Massive Nosin Lo. Somebody who is a sharecropper, apparently in Eretz Yisrael, not just from any Nochri, but from a Nochri who's an oppressor, an oppressive Nochri. Maser V'nosin Lo. He separates Trumas and Maisus, and then he has to give him the full 50 bushels. My area matzik, afilei matzik nami. But the question is, like, what's so special about the fact that he's an oppressor? It makes no difference. We're talking about, right? The same rules would apply, saying that a sharecropper is like a renter, and that even the field owned by a Nachri in Eretz Yisrael is still chayiv in Trumas and Maisus, and that what was the third thing that we said? I don't know. Wait. There were like three things, right? I think the first thing was that it's just. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. A, that Sdei Avosov means that it's a field in Eretz Yisrael. B, that it's still going to be chayiv in Trumas and Maisus, even though it's owned by a Nachri. And C, that sharecropping is just like renting. So what's the difference then if this Nachri happens to be an oppressor or not? So l'olam yesh kinyan l'Nachri be'eretz Yisrael lafkia miyad meiser. So rather, if a Nachri, so ela yesh kinyan l'Nachri be'eretz Yisrael, right? So there actually is kinyan to Nachri in Eretz Yisrael lafkia miyad meiser. Meaning, if a Nachri owns property in Eretz Yisrael, it will not be chayiv in Trumas and Maisus. Umekabel lav kichocher dami. And a sharecropper is not like a renter, right? A renter rents the whole field and he has to separate Trumas and Maisus from the whole field. A sharecropper splits the yield with the owner, and therefore they split the Trumas and Maisus as well. Umay Sdei Avosov, and what does Sdei Avosov mean? Sdei Avosov mamish. What it means is it's literally his family's land, right? Right? Yeah, his family owned land. This Nachri took it, maybe by force, if it's a suppressor, and now he's working the land, his own family's land. And the rabbis fine him to have to pay Trumas and Maisus on this field, even though it's owned by a Nachri, and there's no Trumas and Maisus by a Nachri who owns land in Eretz Yisrael. But still, they fined him to have to pay Trumas and to separate Trumas and Maisus. Because since it's his land and he feels an affinity towards that land, he won't neglect to work the land if he had to pay Trumas and Maisus. Meaning it's his land, he wants to be working the land even if he has to pay Trumas and Maisus. But somebody else who doesn't have that same sort of incentive and investment and interest in the land wouldn't have to pay Trumas and Maisus, because land owned by a Nachri in Eretz Yisrael, there's no Trumas and Maisus. My time at Konsur Rabban. Why do the rabbis fine him? I don't understand. Just because it's his family's field, why should the rabbis make him have to pay Trumas and Maisus if it's owned by a Nachri in Eretz Yisrael? Well, so that he will want to buy it back because he's going to want to work this land because it's his family's land. He's not going to want to have to separate Trumas and Maasros when technically he doesn't have to. So the point of making him pay Trumas and Maasros, even though he doesn't have to, and he's going to work the land anyways because it's his family's land, is as incentive so that he remembers like, hey, I want to buy back this land. I want to make it mine again. This is crazy that A, I don't own it, and B, I'm separating Trumas and Maasros when I don't even have to. So as a reminder and as incentive for him to buy back the land and get it back to himself and not leave it with the Nochri. Interesting. Wow. And says, wow. Kivaldig. And says, Rabbi Yirmiyah, teaching like this, he's a great rabbi like Rabbi Yochanan to teach it. Wow. The significance of buying land. Land purchases in Eretz Yisrael. Wow. Tzionim. Wow. Interesting. Somebody goes into his friend's field and just plants it. Reuven goes into Shimon's field and he just plants trees. Amar Rav says, Rav Shaman lo v'yodo atachtona. So Rav says, okay, well, very nice. He planted. It's like my neighbor over here. You know the one who's always yelling and screaming. Well, she's always yelling and screaming, either just because she is, or because other people are yelling and screaming, so she's yelling and screaming at them. She went and she planted. It's talking interesting. So in the courtyard, in like the little park outside the house where everybody screams and yells. So she actually she put around, there's like a little like wall around it, not to keep people out because that obviously doesn't work. But there's like a little wall around the park, and she put like plants on top of the wall so that people wouldn't sit on it, because if people sit down then they make noise. So she put plants all around the thing. I think my mom pointed out that she uses our water to water the whole situation. So I guess we're technically supplying the water for her whole enterprise. But it's worth it because she waters my plants. Well, they're not really my plants. Come to think about it, she planted the plants in our courtyard too. But I don't care. My mom likes the plants. What do I care? I'll tell you, the plants are nice. I like plants, plants. No, I like plants. But I like the plants. But if the plants weren't there, I wouldn't plant them. Well, whatever, it depends. It's complicated. It depends. Why am I saying this? Oh yeah, right. My neighbor, she waters the plants. She uses some kind of disgusting smelling concoction. She takes all this rotten, she must be composting and stuff, but sometimes it just smells so bad in here. It's like, what smells so bad? It's like, oh, I guess she's watering her plants with whatever gross concoction she uses. So she basically just went in and put plants on everywhere. So if my neighbor goes into Shimon's property and plants all of these plants. She likes to plant cactuses. That's her thing. She's very into cactuses. I don't know why. So she plants a bunch of cactuses. Okay. Anyways, back to the Gemara. Itmar Yori the Soch Stechaver. So somebody goes into so Reuven goes into Shimon's field. And he just plants a bunch of trees. Omer Rav says, Rav Shomin lo v'yoda atachtona. So Rav says, look, what we do is we evaluate the field. We say, okay, what's the value? What's the increased value to the field that these plants provide? Right. So now it's right. Plants are good. Right. It's givaldic. There's value to plants. So what's that added value that was added to the field? And we also take a look at what was the expense that Reuven expended to plant it. And whichever is less expensive is what Shimon pays. And Shmuel says, Shmuel's a little bit more generous. He says, look, we basically figure out how much would a landscaper have charged for this job, how much would people be willing to pay a landscaper for this job, and that's what Shimon will pay Reuven. Amar Papa says, Papa v'lo plige, and they don't argue. It just depends on the field. If it's a field that was meant for these kinds of trees, well then it would be like Shmuel, that you pay whatever the going rate is. If it's a field that is not meant for these trees, well then Shimon would pay Reuven the lower amount. When Rav said that he pays the lower amount, it wasn't explicit at the Michlala Itmar. It's implied from the following story that also the Kama de Rav, a person came before Rav Amarle. Basically, right. So basically, Shimon came before Rav, and he said to Rav, or maybe Reuven came to Rav and says, "Hey, I want to get paid. I planted Shimon's field without asking him." Amarle zil shomle. So Rav says to Shimon, okay, no, go evaluate the field and pay Reuven. Amarle lo ba'ina. Shimon says, I don't want to. I didn't ask Reuven to plant trees. I'm not interested. I don't want these trees. I don't want to pay Reuven for these trees. So, Amarle zil shomle v'yoda al tachtona. Rav says, look, evaluate the field. Figure out the increased value. Figure out how much Reuven expended on it. Pay him the lesser amount. That's it. Just pay the lower amount. Amarle lo ba'ina. Shimon says, look, I don't want to. I don't want to pay Reuven anything. I didn't ask for this. I don't want it. Forget it. L'sov chazi de gadra v'komantule. In the end, what did Rav notice? Rav noticed that all of a sudden Shimon's putting up a fence around his field. Apparently he likes the plants. He wants to protect them. So Rav says, aha, you're a liar. Amalei, Rav says to Shimon, Golis adaitech, you have made clear, you have revealed your intentions, denichalach, that you actually like these trees, and that's why you want to protect them. Well, now, zil shomle v'yodu al elyona. Well, if that's the case, well, it's like Shmuel that you have to evaluate the value and pay him. Is there noise outside? No, thank God. Nice. Wait, what? No, I think not. That's good. I like quiet. I like quiet. Why do I feel like there's noise? I have like a sixth sense for like noise. All right. Itmar hayor desoch churvasu shechavero. Okay. Similarly, if Reuven goes, Shimon's got like an abandoned lot. Reuven goes into Shimon's abandoned lot. And he builds it up. He didn't ask Shimon. Reuven just goes in there and like builds a house there. Then eventually Reuven says, you know what? I'm going to dismantle the house. I'm taking it down. I'm going to take back my wood and my stones. Rav Nachman says, all right, he's entitled to. It's his sticks and stones. He could take them back. Rav Shesha says no. Once he went into Shimon's lot and built something there, he has to leave it. Meisvei, we have a kasha on Rav Nachman. Rav Shimon Gamliel says, Rav Shimon Gamliel, Beishamai omim shomen lo. Beishamai say he could take it down. Rav Hillel omim ein shomen lo, and Rav Hillel says he can't take it down. Lame Rav Nachman domek Beishamai. Does that mean that Rav Nachman who says he could take it down is saying like Beishamai? Obviously, you never want to be the opinion that holds like Beishamai, because we always hold like Beis Hillel. So the Amr Ki Ai Tana Rav Nachman holds like the following Tana, the Tana that we learned in the Brisa, Shomin lo divrei Reb Shimon ben Elazar, that Reb Shimon ben Elazar says Take that he can take it down. And Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Beishamai Om Shomin lo Vesil Om Ein Shomin lo. Meaning according to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, it's a machlokas Beishamai Vesil. Beishamai says you can take it down. Vesil says you cannot take it down. But according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar, however, it's not a machlokas. Everybody agrees that you can take it down, and therefore Rav Nachman holds like the way that Reb Shimon ben Elazar understands this sugya. So what do we say? Rav Yaakov Amar Reb Yechanan bebayis shomelo. Okay, so in the scenario with the abandoned lot, and Reuven built a house there, so Reuven can take it down if he wants. Basad ein shomelo. But if Reuven goes into Shimon's field and plants trees, and then Reuven says, you know what, I want to take back my trees, he cannot. Basad my taima. How come in a field you cannot? We're saying the house he can dismantle, the field not. Mishum Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Because of settling the land of Israel, don't uproot trees in Eretz Yisrael. Settle the land of Israel. Those who say Mishum Kochash Adar. Those who say, well, because it's going to weaken the land. Once you plant the ground, apparently, it weakens the ground. So once already Reuven weakened Shimon's ground, he can't just, say, actually, forget it, I changed my mind. You already made an impact on the ground. It's too late. My benai, what's enough community between if you say Yishuv Eretz Yisrael or Kachash Da'ara? Ika benai Chutz La'aretz. Well, in Chutz La'aretz, what if Reuven went into Shimon's land, but they lived in Chutz La'aretz? So if you say it's because of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, so that doesn't apply in Chutz La'aretz. So Reuven would be able to take back his plants just like he could take back his house. But if it's about weakening the land, well, the land would be weakened in Chutz La'aretz as well. Okay, so now we get to a new Mishnah. It's not an interesting Mishnah, I think. So the Mishnah itself is not really going to make that much. It's going to make like, as I read it and like translate it, like you'll kind of get the gist of like what it's talking, like the subject matter that it's talking about. But the Mishnah isn't really going to make sense until a few lines into the Gemara. Okay, I'm just throwing it out there because like the Gemara explains the Mishnah. But basically, it's talking about kind of, I guess, like responsibilities between a landlord and a tenant. And in terms of evicting a tenant, in terms of when a tenant needs to vacate and move out. And we're going to go until the next Mishnah, further down on the Amud. And okay. So I'm asking Bais Lachaveru. So if Shimon is renting out his house to Reuven, okay, so Shimon owns a house or an apartment, whatever it might be, and he's renting it to Reuven. He can't evict him. The lease, he can't, tell him that he's got to move out. But during the winter between Sukkot and Pesach. During the summer, 30 days. Okay. And in the cities. So in the cities, it's more difficult to find a place, right? Everybody wants to live in the city. It's where everything's happening. It's where the markets are. It's where everything is. So it's more difficult to find an apartment, a vacant apartment. So whether it's the summer, whether it's the winter, 12 months. Okay, we have to figure out what's it talking about. 12 months, 30 days. What about 12 months? What about 30 days? So when it comes to a store, whether it's I think Ayaros, I think Krochim are bigger cities than Ayaros. I think Ayaros are like smaller cities and Krochim are larger cities. Is there a... no, I don't see it. Okay. Oh my gosh. What do you want me to tell you? Okay, fine. Where am I? When it comes to stores, Echad Ayaros v'Echad Krochim 12 chodesh. Whether we're talking about smaller cities or larger cities, 12 months. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, Reb Shimon Gamliel, Chanus Shanachtomim, we're talking about a bakery, V'shal Tzabayim, or a dyer, Shalosh Shanim, 3 years. Okay, we're going to make sense of this Mishnah. What's the deal with the winter? We said he can't kick him out during the winter. Well, I guess maybe let's say that if you rent a apartment, or if you rent an apartment for the winter, you're renting it for the entire winter. But then what's the deal with the summer being 30 days? Why don't you say the same thing then in the summer? That like if you're renting in the summer, it's for the entire summer. So what's the whole 30 days thing in the summer? Well, this is the reason why you can't evict him in the winter. Well, because in the winter it's going to be hard to find another house to rent. But then if we keep going in the Mishnah, what does it say? That when it comes to the cities, whether it's the summer, whether it's the winter, 12 months. Okay, so we're saying in the cities, all of a sudden, it seems right. So apparently there's like this 12 months thing in the cities, but we're saying whether it's the winter, whether it's the summer, meaning if this 12 months are up in the cities, so then the 12 months are up, even if it's in the winter, which implies then that even in the winter you can evict him. But if we're saying that it's about, well, how's he going to find a new place in the winter? So why does it matter? Right, so what's this whole 12 months thing? He's not going to be able to find a house to rent. Okay, here we go. Okay. Things have been maybe you were kind of feeling this way the whole time. Maybe this answers what you were assuming the whole time. But here we go. It means, you know what 12 months is? You know what 30 days is? It's the amount of time you have to give him notice in advance. That's all it is. Vachi ka'amar. Okay, so yeah, things have been like just, I wouldn't even say confusing. They're just like not making sense until now, but now they're going to make sense and it's not hard. Vachi ka'amar. Hamaskir b'ayis chaveru stam. So if Shimon rents a house to Ruvain, ein yachol lotzio bimos agishomim michag vad Pesach. He cannot Shimon cannot evict Ruvain from the house during the winter, and that is between Sukkot and Pesach. Ela imkain, unless hodio shloshim yom me'ikara, unless he had given him 30 days notice in the summer, right? Meaning, if we go back to the Mishnah for a second, go back to the Mishnah. It's about 15 lines higher up. So somebody, right, Shimon rents his house to Ruvain in the winter, and he can't evict Ruvain during the winter between Sukkot and Pesach, unless he had given him a heads up, a warning, notice for at least 30 days during the summer. So if the winter is considered to start at the beginning of Sukkot, the 15th of Tishrei, so by the 15th of Elul, he would have already had to let him know that he was going to have to get out, whenever it is in the winter. Meaning, like, even if it's in March, like Purim time, he would have had to, right? So it's plenty of time, but he would have had to already told him by Elul. Right, so meaning Shimon can't evict Ruvain from the apartment at any time during the winter unless he had given him warning with 30 days in the summer. So even if by Purim time Shimon plans to end the rental to Ruvain, he would still have had to tell him latest 15th of Elul. So in order for Shimon to be able to end his lease to Ruvain at any time during the winter, he would have had to give him 30 days notice during the summer, the latest time being the 15th of El. Back in the Gemara. Also in a brisa like this, when they said 30 days during the summer, when they said 12 months in a city, it's talking about how much notice must be given. Okay, so we just explained that in the winter there would have to be 30 days of notice already from the summer. In the summer, we're saying that just 30 days, right? So if in the after Pesach, comes the beginning of Pesach, you could say, okay, in a month from now you got to get out, and that's fine, right? 30 days in the summer. For the winter, you would have had to have 30 days from the previous summer. In the summer, you got to give 30 days. In a city where it's going to be harder to find a rental, you have to give at least 12 months notice. Beseder. Okay. And just like the Shimon, the rentor, the landlord needs to let Ruvain, give him notice. So also Ruvain, if he plans on leaving, so he also should let Shimon know. The Amalek, because otherwise Shimon would say to Ruvain, look, if you would have let me know and given me proper time and let me know that you were leaving, well, I would have found a suitable tenant. I would have had time to search for a suitable tenant. Rav Asi im nichnas yom echad bimos hageshamim eno yochol leotzio min hachag ad haPesach. So says Rav Asi that once the winter starts, i.e., even once it hits the 15th of Tishrei, eno yochol leotzio min hachag ad haPesach, then Shimon cannot evict Ruvain at that point until Pesach. V'onan shloshim yom kamer. What do you mean? Once it hits the 15th of Tishrei. Once it hits the 16th of Elul, right? We said 30 days, you have to give him 30 days note, meaning the latest he has to let him know by is already back in Elul, not just it's not just when Sukkot starts. So this is, wait, where am I? Yeah. Okay, so this is what it's saying. Im nichnas yom echad bimos agasham mehane shloshim yom. No, what it means is that if Shimon doesn't give Ruvain 30 days of notice prior to the winter, so meaning if, let's say, on the 16th day of Elul, he lets Ruvain know, and which means that the 30 days end on the 16th day of Tishrei, well, that's already not enough time. And Shimon would not be able to evict Ruvain until Pesach. Ravuna says, Ravuna, Vimbal Rabus Bidamel Marbe. And says Ravuna, now while Shimon can't evict Ruvain during the winter, or without proper notice, but he can increase the rent. He can increase the rent though. Rav Nachman, I'll tell you, I was a little bit surprised when I saw this phrase in BavaMetzia, in the Gemara. I wouldn't have expected. Yeah, I guess I wouldn't have expected this phrase in the Gemara. Yeah. Even if I explain it like cleanly, I feel like I wouldn't have explained it. I wouldn't expect this from the Gemara, I guess. Yeah. Should I explain it cleanly, or should I explain it kind of the way that most people would generally say it, colloquially? Basically, Rav Nachman is saying well, basically, okay. So what are we saying? We're saying that Shimon can't force Ruvain out of the apartment he can't evict him during the winter, right? But what can he do? He can increase the rent. So the Gemara says, well, he's basically grabbing him by the balls and saying, "Give me your garment." Obviously, he's going to give him the garment, and so I mean, yeah, maybe you can't evict him, but by increasing the rent, you're basically forcing him out. So let's read the Aikar Bate. Well, it's talking about a scenario where the prices went up, Prices go up, so therefore Shimon had to increase the rent. So I mean, it's not talking about prohibitively, it's talking about just sort of practically. Okay, says the Gemara, Pshita nafale beisa. Okay, so certainly so Shimon is renting out his house to Reuven, but then Shimon's own house falls down, and Shimon is now homeless. So Pshita nafale beisa. Certainly, if Shimon's house falls down, and now he needs a house to live in, and he goes to Reuven and says, "Reuven, I need to evict you." So Amale lo adifas minoi. So Shimon would be allowed to say to Reuven, "Look, I need you to get out, because why should I live on the street?" Zabne o orte o yaiv matana. However, if Shimon ended up selling the apartment, or he bequeathed it, or he gave it as a gift, I guess, is bequeathing the same thing as giving as a gift, just that you do it to your family? Is that the point? Otherwise, I don't really know what the difference is between bequeathing and giving as a gift while he's still alive. Because orte is to inherit. Oh wait. Yeah, but orte means to bequeath. Does that mean that he died and that's how he bequeathed it? Oh, maybe. So matana so amale. So then, in that case, Reuven. So let's say he sells it, right? So Shimon sells the house to somebody else, to Levi. Now Levi comes to Reuven. He says, "Oh, hey, Reuven, I just bought the house. You got to get out." Reuven says, "No, 1 second. Levi, you're no different than Shimon. Just like Shimon wouldn't be able to evict me right now, neither can you." So Amalei. So Reuven says to this third party, "Lo adifas migavid osis mina." You're no different than the person who you're coming from, right? Shimon wouldn't have been able to evict me, neither can you. Kalei livrei. What if his Yingel? What if Shimon's son got married, and now his son needs a place to live? So Chazina, so we see, well, if Shimon could have told Reuven in advance that his son was getting married and that he was going to need a place to stay, well, then he should have told Reuven. But Vilo, if maybe it was very last minute, so then then Shimon says to Reuven, "Look, why should my son live on the street? I need you to get out." Okay. Right, Shimon says that to Reuven. A person bought a boatload of wine. The problem was, after buying a boatload of wine, is what do you do with a boatload of wine? He didn't have anywhere to store it. So he said to a certain fella, do you have epis, a place to rent to me? Do you have a storage space to rent to me that I could put my boatload of wine? She says, no, I don't. Also kidsha, so when he was mekadesh, or he married her. Okay, so now they were married, and she says, all right, look, you could put your wine in that room. Also leveise kosav logito shadula. The son of a gun goes home, writes a get, and gives it to her. Ozla'i agrish koloi mine uve afikte ve'osve bishvila. She then went and hired movers to get that wine out of her house, and the expense of the movers came from the wine itself, and she put the wine out on the street. Omar Ravuna Bed of Yeshua, and says of Ravuna Bed of Yeshua, Kasher also Kenye Osolo. That Shmendrik, like he did, so was done to him. Gemulo Yoshev Barosho, what he has done has been, done back to him on his head. That's Shmendrik. Lo miboyo chotzer de lokaim el agra, and not only would this be true in a storage facility that she was not planning to rent out, but ela afilu chotzer de kaim el agra, even if it was a space that she was planning to rent out, Amrle, she could still say to this guy, look, I'd be happy to rent out the space to other people. I just don't want to rent out this space to you. Because you are like a what's that thing called when you like an ambush, like a lion waiting in ambush. I don't want anything to do with you, Yishmendrik. Rav Shimon Gamliel says Rav Shimon Gamliel that for bakers and for dyers 3 years. So meaning, right? So the Mishnah had said, okay, so now that we understand the Mishnah that it's talking about how much notice you have to give before evicting somebody. So we had said in the Mishnah, so when it comes to a store, you have to give 12 months notice. You always have to give 12 months notice, because in a store, right, there are people, right, the store owner might sell on credit, and therefore people owe him money. And if he just gets evicted suddenly, then there are all these people going to come to pay him back, and he's going to be gone, and they're going to be unable to pay him. So therefore, there always has to be 12 months notice. And we said, Rav Shimon Gamliel said that when it comes to bakers, when it comes to dyers, it's even 3 years notice. Because I guess bakers and dyers give like very, very generous lines of credit, and therefore, people even 3 years later could be coming back to pay them. That was the Kuf Aleph of Masechta BavaMetzia. Wow, we talked about some pretty interesting stuff. I mean, the first Mishnah, which is interesting, it talks about those olive trees and like Orla and Yishuv Eretz Yisrael and Trumis and Maisvis and Nachum. There was a lot of talk of very interesting stuff. Sharecroppers, when the olive trees get uprooted with their earth, and then in terms of halachos of Orla, a lot of interesting things there in Daf Kuf Aleph of Masechta BavaMetzia. And then we talked about renting real estate. Renting property, houses, apartments, and the responsibility with the responsibilities that the landlords have to tenants, and that tenants have to landlords. Very interesting stuff. Peace out.